Hi everyone, this is Sean Ismail from the Cloud Ranger, and you are viewing the Microsoft Azure training. Today's session, we're going to talk about the Azure Virtual Machines. This is the part one of the advanced concepts. Previously, in one of the sessions, we talked briefly about just an introduction on how virtual machines are made in Azure Management Portal, and some of the virtual machines we have made in the previous sessions were in PowerShell as well. So we have worked with virtual machines, but never really formally got into the virtual machine in Azure and how it is done, the constructs and stuff like that. And that's what we are going to do in the next few sessions in the advanced concepts. We are pretty much going to go through every aspect of the virtual machine in Azure. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about is infrastructure as a service, because cloud is all about the PaaS, the platform as a service, SaaS, software or service as a service, and you have IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service. And virtual machine tightly couples into the entire infrastructure as a service services that's provided by Microsoft Azure. So why do you need Azure Virtual Machines? If everything was going to be taken care of platform as a service and software as a service, then why do we even need virtual machines? Well, for infrastructure, virtual machine happens to be one of the primary constructs where it's all about what you can do, what you are capable of doing in the cloud, and how much control you have in the cloud. So what happens is that when you create a virtual machine in Azure, the underlying infrastructure is managed by Microsoft, so you do not have to worry about the hardware, operating systems, and things like that. It's completely managed by Microsoft, and all you're going to do is manage the virtual machine. Having said that, the virtual machine management also will include all the software and all the other things, the roles, features you can put on the virtual machine. You have complete control of that. And that's one of the primary reasons you want to have a virtual machine, even though Azure now provides most of, well, I'm not going to say most, but quite a lot of on-premise roles and features that you would get today as a service on Azure. But still, they give you a provision for doing this in virtual machines. So I want to introduce you to a term called workloads. And the reason I want to introduce this term is because this is a very cloud-specific term. We used to use this on-premise quite a bit, but it wasn't really as common. What workloads really mean is, in simple terms, roles or features that your server can provide. So for an example of a workload, a server workload would be a domain controller or a DNS or SQL. And the whole idea you would see behind cloud would be, and actually sales pitch would be, that you can move your workloads from on-premise to the cloud. What basically they mean is that you can take a role you have on premise today and move it to the cloud, like a DNS role or a domain controller role, and you can move it. And knowing not only what workload means, but what are the supported workloads in Microsoft Azure is important as well. And the reason behind that is that when you are doing a migration or a data center extension to the cloud, you want to know what all are supported in a virtual machine which is residing in Azure Cloud. So this is the link that I have over here where you can go and clearly see the workloads that's supported by Microsoft Azure Virtual Machines. And we'll just do that right now. And you can see I have the browser open up over here. I went to that link, and these are all the supported workloads that Azure Virtual Machines can have. And you can see that there's almost everything that you do with Microsoft's 2012 server or 2008 server is already there. These are all supported workloads that are there. But then there are times when there might be this one unique workload that the virtual machine in Azure will not provide. So for planning point of view, this is something you have to remember. To always check before you go and create a virtual machine in Azure and try to give that virtual machine a basically a role in there. Okay, so that's what workloads are. Now moving on, This is also one of the most important things in Azure will be how to create the virtual machines, all the different ways you can create the virtual machines. So we have been working quite a bit with the Azure Management Portal. The URL for that is manage.windowsazure.com. We have been doing this throughout. The preview portal is quite rich and it can do a lot of stuff that management portal can do, and Microsoft claims, and I've seen a couple of times that it's more intuitive with certain things. It's more visible. It got a nice flat structure. So you can go to the preview portal as well and create virtual machines. Obviously, Windows PowerShell, and you can do pretty much everything with Windows PowerShell and much more. Of course, you have to remember how to do that, the commandlets in PowerShell, but you can do that as well. And then we have something called as a cross-platform command line interface, or XPlat. We have not really introduced this yet, but what it does, it's like PowerShell, but it has its own syntax, and it's a cross-platform, means you can use that same command on your Windows, your Linux, or even on Macs. There are times where you might use that for scripting. I don't use that quite often. Most of the stuff I feel can be done from PowerShell, but that's because I'm primarily using Windows machine and PowerShell is native on Windows, so it's much easier. But however, if you're working on a primarily Linux box, you probably want to use XPlat for doing all your command line scripts and things like that. And that's the whole thing about Windows Azure or Microsoft Azure, is that it's not about only the Windows virtual machines, it's also about the Linux and all the other operating systems. And Microsoft has done a pretty awesome job in giving you the capabilities of using the command line or the cross-platform command line interface to accomplish all the scripting that you'd ideally be doing in PowerShell in Windows, but you can do that in Linux as well. And the syntax and the commands on there are quite a bit different, so it will be a learning curve if you're just going to go in there. We will go through some of this in the next few sessions, but I'm not going to go into too much details besides the ones that are expected out of you in exams. And the next one is quite interesting. Most of us infrastructure guys probably don't use that as often, but if you're a developer and doing some development work with Visual Studio, the Visual Studio can have a nice connector to Microsoft Azure, and you can use Visual Studio as well to deploy virtual machines. And significantly, a lot can be done from the Visual Studio, because not only you can do your virtual machines, but you can do other scripting or codes to directly with REST API to do a lot of stuff on the virtual machine directly. So it's a pretty interesting tool as well to do that. So these are all the available options for you to create Azure virtual machines in Microsoft Azure. So let's get into a little bit of advanced topics here. Like we have touched some of this, we breezed through, but now we are going to go through them properly. So what's the construct of a virtual machine? If you are doing today some virtualizations in your on-premises, some of these are quite familiar. I mean, it's not, the underlying concept is still quite a bit same, except that there are little things that are different when you, it's just how you do it on Azure. It's not about what you do, because those things are probably similar in both on-premises and in Microsoft Azure. What I mean by this is that anything you can do on Hyper-V today on your on-premise almost can be done in Microsoft Azure. The reason I say almost is because there will be that one-off thing that you can probably do in on-premise Hyper-V, but you might not be able to do with the virtual machine on the cloud, but almost everything can be done. Now, I want to carefully mention one thing over here is that if you have been using the latest version of Hyper-Vs and things like that with 2012 or Windows 8 or 7 even, you may have noticed that the virtual hard disk is VHDX format. It's not a VHD, even though you can do a VHD. This is now 2015 when I'm making this video, and if you're watching it right now, Microsoft Azure only currently supports VHD. I know for some weird reason they won't do the VHDXs yet, but they are only currently supporting VHD. And I'll tell you why this matters to you in the next couple of slides, or even in this slide, I'll mention a little bit about it, that why it's important. But yeah, anything you can do on an on-premise Hyper-V can be done on, almost can be done on your Microsoft Azure. So let's talk about a little construct here. So we have seen when you create a virtual machine, you need a cloud service. And now you can see in parentheses here, I've wrote domain name. Um, on the management portal, the portal we have been using, it's called Cloud Service. It's also called Cloud Service on the PowerShell. I'm noticing that Microsoft has changed that a little bit in the preview portal where they started calling the cloud service as a domain name. I can see why they're going to call it a domain name because a cloud is almost like a domain with a cloud app.net as its DNS, and your cloud service name would be, for example, Ranger Webs or whatever web or whatever DNS, whatever name you put in there. But Microsoft has started calling it a domain name. And this I can see also becoming a little bit confusing when you start talking about the Active Directory domain name. These are completely different. These are not the same. The domain name over here is actually referring to cloud service, and in preview portal you might actually see domain name rather than cloud service. But we are going to call it cloud services for all our purposes here. And what we know from previous sessions is that a cloud service is basically a container for a virtual machine. It's also used for networking and how you access the virtual machines. But anytime we create a virtual machine, we need a cloud service. We can create this cloud service before, or we can create this cloud service while making the virtual machine. And a cloud service can hold multiple virtual machines as well. Then we need a storage. This is no different from the SAN or direct attached storage or even local storage you put on a Hyper-V or a VMware server. It's the local storage or an extended enterprise grade storage. You need the storage as well on the cloud, right? Where you have to put your your OS, which is your operating system, or your data VHDs. And that's where uh, the storage is the place where your VHD is going to be stored. Now, we are going to have an entire set of sessions based on storage on the Microsoft Azure cloud. But here I'm going to just give you the basic idea of what the storage is going to do. Storage can actually do a lot more in Azure, but here we are just storing the operating system and the data disks in a container in the storage. So we are going to have storage accounts, and where are you going to do that? I have another slide coming up for storage as well. The next thing is that, okay, now that you have the cloud services storage, what are you going to do? So you need to actually create a virtual machine. So we are going to talk about the image quite a bit over here, because if you followed previous sessions, you'll notice that we have always gone and chosen an image, a Windows Server 2012 R2 data center image for deploying our virtual machine. So Microsoft provides an extensive set of pre-built images for you. So if you want 2012 or 2008, or if you want Linux, or if you want some appliance, those images are already provided to you. This is sort of like the virtual appliances kind of stuff you get on your Hyper-V or your VMM or VMware, but it's also like a pre-built VHD, which is like a template that you use to deploy your operating system. This is no different, and we'll get into details of this as well. Your virtual machine also requires networking. I'm really not going to get into networking a lot in the next few sessions. The reason behind that is that you probably should go back and watch our extensive coverage on all the networking sessions that I had, where we talked about pretty much all the networking stuff that you can do on a virtual machine, static IPs, virtual networks, and virtual private networks, extending your data center. So if you are curious about that, it's actually all the previous sessions on networking. Please go and view that. I will have certain expectation in the next few sessions that you have already gone through those. And the next construct of a virtual machine is a couple of operating system related configurations. Now you have to understand that as far as Microsoft Azure is concerned, you can do Windows, you can do Linux, you can do a lot of other images and other operating systems, even custom images if you want. And there are certain specific configuration that need to be that needs to be done before you while you deploy the virtual machine, which are almost specific to either Windows or Linux or any other virtual machines. So we'll look into a couple of those OS related configurations as well. Now, there are a lot of things that go into a VM, but I feel that these are the primary things a virtual machine needs in Azure when you want to make them. So these are your basic constructs, and in the next few slides, we're going to get into some details on this. Okay, so Not a whole lot of time is going to be spent on this slide because we have gone through this similar slide in previous sessions where we talked about cloud services. So once again, a cloud service is basically somewhere on your Azure, which acts as a container for your virtual machine, and cloud service is basically how you access the virtual machines as well. If these stuff like VIP, cloudapp.net, dip, and all these are not making sense to you, you probably want to go to our previous sessions and really get a good coverage on all of this before you proceed into the next slides, because I'm assuming you know all of that. The other thing about the cloud services is that it also can contain multiple virtual machines. So anytime we create a virtual machine, gives you an option to create a cloud service. But if you create a cloud service first, when you are creating these virtual machines, you can specify that single cloud service to get in there. And there is a big reason for this to happen. And in my previous session, I told you that we'll talk about this in details. And in the next few sessions, we are going to actually get into details on how this assists you with the virtual machines, high availability, load balance, and things like that with the cloud service. There are two commandlets I want to demonstrate right now while we go through this. One is the test Azure name and the service, and the get Azure service names. What this basically does is that when you are going to create a virtual machine or a cloud service on the UI, means on the management portal or the preview portal, it gives you enough information on, hey, if this cloud service is available or not. When you're doing this in a PowerShell and in a script, you possibly cannot, I mean, it cannot tell you right away if this is available or not. So to make your script more self-sufficient and more robust, you want to run a couple of commandlets to make sure that, hey, I'm creating this cloud service. I just want to make sure that these cloud services are available for me or not. And the reason this is important, because you remember, for example, over here, vm1.cloudapp.net, this actually goes into a public DNS, and this vm1.cloudapp.net would be something that needs to be available for you, just like a public DNS. I mean, if you don't own the domain or if you don't own the DNS, then that's not yours. I mean, for example, vm1.cloudapp.net, something tells me that somebody for sure has this, and we may not be able to use that. So let's go ahead to our client machine and actually test that out, that what these two commandlets can actually do. So before I jump into the command list, I just want to show that I have 3 virtual machines made for you already. It's CRanger VM001, CRanger VM002, and I have a CRanger Web2, for example. So the thing that's happening here is that I do have 3 cloud services here. So if you go to cloud services, you can see one cloud service is CRanger VM001, and the one is 002, and the CRanger Web. So what's happening here is that these 2 virtual machines have their own cloud services, CRanger VM001 and 002, and this one is actually using a specifically previously built cloud service. That's why you can see that the name is CRanger Web. So I actually went to cloud service here and created one before I went and did that. And for the other 2, I built these cloud services while I was building this virtual machine. So looking at our 2 commandlets that we are going to use, the first one was the test Azure name. So let's go and do that. What this will do is test Azure name, and the service parameter, I'm going to go and check if CRanger VM001 is an available cloud service for me. So if I go and do that, it says true. The reason it says true is because it says that it's already present. That's why it's true. This does not mean that it's free. Do not get confused with that. This just means that it's true, means it's already taken. And if you do something like, I don't know, something weird like this, it says false, means it's not taken. So if you are doing some scripting and you are doing some logic in there, you want to test this and you want to make sure that it's false before you actually use this cloud service to create a virtual machine. Now you have to be careful. Having said that, what if I actually get this as a true? Can I still create a virtual machine in this cloud service? Absolutely, because like I said before, that a cloud service can have multiple virtual machines. So in this case, if this was the cloud service name, myweb.cloudapp.net, and it gives you as true, it doesn't matter. I can add another virtual machine or add another virtual machine. That's if it's in my subscription. Obviously, if it's in somebody else's subscription, you'll not have access to that cloud service to put or sneak in your virtual machine in there. So even if this actually says true, that's okay. As long as it's yours and you can do something with it, you can use that. The other one was get Azure service. And similarly, it has the service name parameter here. And let's do this. cranger VM001. We know that this is already taken, right? So let me expand this a little bit because it'll give you more information. As you can see, it gives you more information. What's the service name? What is the URL to get there? It's already created, and you can see a bunch of information when it was created, modified, and things like that. And as usual, if you go and put something that's not taken, it probably just come and say that hosted service does not exist. So these are the two things that are quite important for you while creating a cloud service from PowerShell. If you were to create a cloud service from here or within a VM, I just want to show you how intuitive this is. So if you do a quick create and you do something like Cloud Ranger VM01 or sorry, VM01, obviously it's going to allow us to do that because it's a unique name. Let's do a cranger VM01. It's going to allow us to do that as well because that exists for us. Um, Give me 1 second, 001. This obviously is not going to work because it's already in use. We know that we are already using that. If we do something really, really random, you can see again it's available because nobody's using all that. So this check for you is already done when you go and do this from UI from both the management and the preview portal. But in the PowerShell, it's not done, so you need to make those. You need to have those tests there. Okay. Um, let's go back to our slides here. The other thing I want to talk about is location. Location is very important when we are creating the cloud service is because these virtual machines will end up being in the cloud service at a specific location. What does that really mean? Okay, so when we go to create a cloud service, you can see it's actually going to ask you for a location, a region. That's because it wants to know where it's going to host it, what the VIP is going to be. If you remember our networking sessions, the virtual IP address or the public IP address has to be from that specific region. So it matters a lot where your virtual machine is going to be located based on this cloud service. So a location is very important. And what do we know about locations? We know that every time we try to create a virtual machine or we try to create a cloud service, it's the same. It actually will ask you, it will show you all these locations, right? So these are all locations that are available in Azure to like today if you go to create something. How do you check this in PowerShell? I mean, I'm going to show everything. So those are the locations, and I'm going to show everything how you do in PowerShell as well. So the commandlet for that is get Azure location. So let's do that. Get Azure locations, and we are going to press enter. And you can see that you get a ton of info when you do that. So let's see one of these. Get Azure location. Let's look at the US or the West US. This is no different from the West US you're seeing here, right? But obviously you're not seeing a lot of details from the UI, but here you can see what it does. You can see all the services that are present in this region or this location. All the web worker size roles, virtual machine role sizes, and I'm going to get more into the virtual machine role sizes very soon, but you can see all these are here, storage account types, and all of that. The reason this information are given over here is that not all the locations or regions will have all the features available. This is something you have to be very careful about. So if you are in West USA, there might be things that may not be present, for example, in Japan West. Like for example, right away looking at Japan West, I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, all right, there's no A0 and A1, A2. Those are all set by actually, those are actually shown over here with large, medium, and small. They are actually there. That's a bad example. I'll tell you why all these have a code and these all are by name when we get to the role sizes. But my point here is that there are stuff that are not going to be present in certain regions based on the availability of many things, because Microsoft might not have stuff that's already set there, or there might be local rules and regulations. But here in the Get Azure location, you get a brief idea about what's present in what location. And this is something you should, even if you're going to just do it randomly in this lab, when you are doing this in production, you should refer this, or even the MSDN documents where it actually tells you what's present for you and what's not. Let's do this. I'm going to filter this with the display name. So let me try that to actually show you the same list that I usually look at. The properties display name. So this will be similar to the exact list you see over here using PowerShell, right? And make sure you look at some of the stuff over here. These are definitely something important things that you need to look into. And now, just looking at this, I found out the example I wanted to give you earlier. Actually, let's go up over here. You can see in West US we have a virtual machine which is standard G1, G2. These are high performance virtual machines, role sizes, and I am going over here, and I'm actually seeing in Japan West those role sizes are not there. There's no G series that's available in the virtual machine role sizes, and I'm not surprised because G happens to be one of those high performance virtual machines, and it requires different underlying hardware that might not be there in the Japan West data center. So as you can see, it stops at standard D4, but over here, when you look at West USA, you can see that after the standard D4, it goes to the G series. So that was the example I wanted to give earlier to tell you that not all data centers will have all the virtual machine role sizes available. And that's why viewing this is important depending on which part of the world you're from or where you want to host this. Okay, so that was the Get Azure location that you get over here. And I wanted to show you that. Okay, moving on, we want to talk about the storage. This is the storage where your virtual machine will be actually stored. So your virtual machine storage will require a storage that has a storage account. So, or a storage account will have the storing places. So far, whenever we created a virtual machine, we went ahead and said, create a new storage account and do it. The endpoints, the containers, storage URLs were all done for us. And I want to show you what I mean by that. When we created a virtual machine, so let's do a new, and I'm going to do a from gallery, and I'm going to create a virtual machine over here, random. I'm not actually going to create it, but just going to do it. C-Ranger Web 1, for example. It's going to be a standard virtual machine. This is the sizes A1, A2, and the G sizes that all we were talking about earlier. I'll get into the details on this later, but let's leave it standard for now because I'm not really creating this virtual machine. But so far, that's what we have always done. I have come to size over here and pick something like an A3 or whatever. Give the virtual machine a name. Now, this is the spot I wanted to show you. Storage account. We always left this the way it was. We said that use an automatically generated storage account. Having done that, what happened was that if you go to storage already, I mean, if you haven't been there, but you can see there are 3 virtual machines. Obviously, I went and created 3 virtual machines with 3 automatically create the storage accounts, and it created 3 random storage accounts for me. In this storage account, let's take the first one. If you go in there and go to the dashboard, you can see that these are the service endpoints for the storage, and it was located at East US 2. And if we go to the container, if we go to the configure, you can see there are a lot more options here. We'll get into all this later. Go to containers. You can see that there is a container called VHDS. So let's go to the VHDs, and you can see that it went and created those 2 virtual machines in here. So 001.vhd and C-Ranger Web 2, the VHD, was actually stored in this container. So let's go to the other one and see what's there in these containers. There's nothing over here. There's other VHDs over here. Let's go and see this one. This is the cranger VM002 that was created in here. So it randomly went and created the storage account for you and stored the virtual hard drive in there for you randomly. But what I want to say is that this is where in Azure the virtual machine stores the VHDs. Um, you have a lot of access on this storage accounts. I'm going to get into the slide and tell you what I mean by a lot of access. And you can actually control this. So rather than having this randomly, you can create your storage account first and then let the virtual machine know where to store it. So in your production, rather than doing this random, you probably would have a specific storage account created where all the VHDs are going to be located. But for our purposes, we have always gone and told the virtual machine creation wizard that randomly create an account and put it there. And that's what we have done here. And that's why you can see that it's all randomized over here. In production, you obviously want to take care of that and make that a little bit more accurate. So, and I'll go through one of those examples with you later. And like I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of information on storage in a set of sessions that are going to be there in the future. So what do we want to know about the virtual machine contexts of storage? The first thing we want to know is that every time you create a virtual machine, the OS disk or the C drive is always going to be a max size of 127 gigs. It's dynamic. It's a dynamic disk, and that's how it stores it. Um, I want to mention one thing over here. If you remember, in our early slides, I said that everything in Azure is built. So you will be built for everything. So just because the max size over here is 127 gig, it's not going to be charged from 127 gigs. So for example, if you create a new operating system, it might only take 8 or 9 gigs, but the drive is going to be as big as 127. But no, you are not going to pay for 127. It's actually the charge that's all dependent on how much data is actually within the VHD. So do not think that you are going to pay for all 127 gigs when you'd be like, hey, I don't need more than 30 gigs in this virtual machine. Do not worry about it. Let it give all 127. You're good. So in OS disk in Windows is in C drive. In Linux, the OS disk is in actually dev/SDA1. That's the partition of root directory if you're going to work on Linux. The data disks are the disks that you can add additionally to your virtual machine. So you can actually go and create a data disk, drive E, and you have to remember that each data disk can go up to 1 terabyte. So this is not your operating system disk, this is for your data. All the virtual machines also have a physical temporary disk, and I'm going to just skip this for now, and I'm going to just come back to this right after I finish the rest of the slides. And like I mentioned before, the Azure storage charges only apply when the data within the VHD that has actually been written. So if you have not written, if you even have a 1 terabyte of data disk created for this, but you have not really written any data for it, you're not going to charge for it. You want to ensure that you perform a quick format. For the guys who understand how formatting works in details, we just want to make sure that we are using quick format so the disk is not entirely zeroed out with with the full format. So you're not going to really write all over the data, all over the available space. So you want to make sure it's a quick format, and you only charge for whatever you're writing. And the disk IOPS, this is probably one of the most important things that you have to remember. A disk IOP is up to a maximum of 500 per disk in Azure. This is important if you're going to do SQL. We do this a lot with SharePoint. We have to ensure that you have a certain IOPS requirement for your workload or for your roles. So you might want a higher IOP for your SQL for accessing the data on the disk. And the way right now Azure is set up is that you're not going to get more than 500 IOP. And the way to increase that would actually to go get premium storage, which could give you up to 50,000 IOPS and something ridiculously high for like real-time operations. And again, the other way to increase your IOP would be for the guys who understand storages here, you can increase the amount of disks. So you can, instead of having 1 terabyte disk, you can have three 1 terabyte disks each, and you can actually put them in a RAID, or you can actually use the Windows storage spaces where it will become a RAID 5, RAID 10, or whatever, RAID 1+0, things like that, and it will increase your IOPS. And there are tools that you can use to measure this IOPS. But for now, you have to remember that by default is 500. Now let's go back to this all VMs have physical temporary disk. What does this mean? For this, I am going to actually take you to a virtual machine we created before. So I'm going to take you to CRanger VM002. I've already RDP'd into it. Let's go in here. I've done nothing in this except creating the virtual machine. And you can see that it already has a 127 or it says 126, which is fine, local disk, right? And this local disk is only using so much. It's not using the whole thing. So you're not going to be charged. You're only using like 16.2 used space. So that's what you'll be charged for. You can also see there's a temporary storage D drive, and it is up to like 135 gigs here. And you can see that there is a text file, and I did not put the text file. This text file was put there for you. That's in there, which says any data stored on this drive is subject to loss and there is no way to recover it. So what Microsoft does anytime you create a virtual machine is gives you this drive for free. It's a physical disk. I want to be careful when I say physical disk, but it is a physical disk on the server where your virtual machine is right now, where this storage is given for you. And what you can do in this storage is that you can put any temporary data, any data you do not care about. You have downloaded a piece of software and you want to just store it temporarily there, and you do not want to put it here to take up space, right? You can put it in this drive. And this is a temporary storage, and Microsoft actually takes all this effort to put this file over there is because as soon as you restart this virtual machine, this data you have over here is volatile. It might just disappear. So do not put any persistent data in here. Do not think that this is your data drive, which is usually marked by a D drive, and where you can, for example, start putting your SQL databases or log files and all that. Like, I cannot warn you enough that why you should not do this, because the minute you restart this virtual machine, there are chances that these are gone. There's no backups of this. There's nothing you can do to recover that data, and please do not put anything over here. The only thing you put over here is temporary stuff, the stuff you really do not care about if the virtual machine was to restart or whatever. So every VM will have this temporary storage, and it's actually a physical space on the physical server where this virtual machine is created. The rest of the storage are Microsoft has their own storage pool. These are not your local on the server storage. So it's no different from the virtual machines you create on premise, where this might be located somewhere on a SAN or in a DAS, direct attached storage somewhere. But this is actually, according to Microsoft documentations, a local physical drive on the physical server where this virtual machine is created. So that's all we are going to talk about storage for now in the constructs. Moving on. This is like something I have been putting up for a while, but now it's time. It's the Azure VM tiers and sizes. So Microsoft Azure currently has two tiers. One is a basic and one is a standard tier. There's a little bit of overlap between these two tiers, but there's a specific reason there are these two tiers. The reason behind these two tiers is that Microsoft has different features that are available in these two tiers for the virtual machine. So you might have a tier which is A0, which is on basic, and you might have a tier A0, which is also on a standard. But the difference in features is that if you are building that VM on a standard tier, it is going to be something which has features like high availability, and it has something like high availability, and it has things like the other feature I'm just trying to remember is that auto scale. Yes, auto scale. So it will auto scale. I'm going to get into those features in the subsequent sessions, but those are all the other features that are present there with the standard tier, but that are not there in your basic tier. And let's go again in our machine over here, and I'm going to show you how do we get to this tier. So anytime we were creating a virtual machine, we actually had two tiers that I have always been picking up from. When you go to the size, you can see there are multiple sizes here. I have always gone to the standard tier to pick up this. If you go to the basic, you can see the size changes. So if you go to the basic tier, you only have A0 to A4, which is like 5 sizes of virtual machines. And if you go to standard, obviously you can see it also has A0 to A4, but it has a lot more over here. Okay, so these are two tiers, and the basic difference of these tiers are in features. The A0 over here is similar in size and everything with the A0 on the standard. If you look at this, shared core 768 megs, on standard it's the same. However, in the standard tier, you are going to get things like load balancing and auto scales that are certain resources you are not going to get on basic, because they say that basic is for basic stuff. So chances are most of the time you'll be doing things in standard depending on what you're doing. Do not forget that the price between the Azure over here and the price in Azure over here will be different just because the additional features are there. So even if you do like A4 over here and A4 over here, there's a difference in pricing, even though the specifications in sizes are the same. Okay, now let's go into the OS sizes. The OS sizes are these are the sizes of your virtual machines. They are the pre-built sizes for you with resources. So if you go to your on-premises Hyper-V today, you can always go and say how many cores you want, how much memory you want, how much disk space and stuff like that you want. And this is what basically it is that we are doing here. If we go to standard, we are looking at the number of cores. So for A1, it means it's going to give you one core with 1.75 gigs of memory and much more. You can go up to 32 cores for 48 gigs of memory. These are like big hosts like G5. This is the G series, the new series that came out with extensive performance because of the resources that can be given to you. With a G5, it obviously reflects the resources. With 32 cores and with this much memory, a G5 might cost you a few $1,000s per month to just run this 24/7 based on the pricing. So these are all the pre-built image virtual machine sizes and resources that are given for you. For most of the tasks that you'll do, most of the workloads you'll be putting on in the Azure will be served by this. It's rare that it will not fall in one of those categories, and I'll tell you what happens when it won't fall in those categories. But for now, you have to remember that those are the two tiers that are there. Now with the sizes, like we mentioned, that you can go to the GUI or the UI and you saw the sizes over there. However, we can do similar stuff in PowerShell. And it's also important that you are able to do this in PowerShell, because sometimes that's one easy way to look up information rather than going to MSDN or internet and finding that. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of demonstration of these three commandlets. So we have seen that one way of looking at those sizes were coming to new over here and going to from gallery, putting in information here, and we just did that, right? So C Ranger VM 0003, something random, and you can see over here all the sizes are provided to you. Now we are trying to gain all this information from PowerShell, and the way we will do that is, let's clear the screen. The first one is get Azure role. If I can spell it right, get Azure role size. If you hit enter on that, it will give you all similar information that you can get from the site. So it's called an instance size. So you can see A10, A11, A5, A6, and things like that. So let's make this a little bit more unique. Let's go here, and we are going to look for the property. Oops. We're going to look for the property instance size, right? So if you do that, you can see these are all the sizes that are available to you. Okay, so these were the basic tiers, which are actually called basic A0 to basic A4, and then you have all the standard ones, which are all named by standard. However, you can see that there are some names called small, medium, extra large, and all that. You have to remember that these are actually standard. These are not, you remember the basic and the standard tiers? So when we went over here, we could see under standard, there were A0 to A4, and in basic, we could see A0 to A4 as well. So when we are here, basic is A0 to A4, but instead of standard A0 to A4, it actually gives you name as a small, medium. So A0 would be something like an extra small. So when you do extra small with your PowerShell script to create a virtual machine, it basically means you're going to standard tier with A0. This is like an old way of naming it, but it's used quite extensively. So most of our previous examples, when I went and created the network, I always named it as small or medium or large. It actually meant that it was one of those A0 to A4 machines in the standard tier. And I'll show you where you can actually get that actual name, but that's what it really means. And then everything else is like with standard. So you can see that A10 and all that, these are all standard. So um, these are all the role instance sizes, and you can get it with that commandlet. So let me do one more commandlet here. I mean the same commandlet, but I'm going to this time do a different switch here, instance size, and I'm going to go and say that let's do the extra small. Let's see what that actually tells you. So you can go and get specific information or more information on each of these uh, instance sizes. It actually says that it has one core and this much of memory. Um, it's actually showing you a bunch of information such as the cores, memory in megabytes, maximum disk count is 1, um, all this stuff, all this extra stuff. So let's do another one rather than this one. I want to show you something really big here, like a standard G5. Let's try this one. Let's see. Wow. So this will actually give you 32 cores, a lot of memory, 400 gigs, close to 400 something gigs. There are 32 cores. Um, and you can see it's supported by virtual machines. You can have up to 64 disks in there. So you can see obviously this one will allow you one disk. This one can allow you up to 64 and things like that. This is one way, one excellent way to actually get information on that. And if you remember the last few commandlets we ran when we did that get Azure location, you could actually see, and let's actually do that. Get Azure location. I want to go into a lot more, and you can see now that this virtual machine role sizes, this is what was there before. So it actually shows which location allows you which role sizes. So obviously Japan West did not have the G series, and we went and saw that the G series was present in the West US, right? So that's what it was, that each location will actually have certain role sizes that are available. So it's a good place to see that. And in PowerShell, knowing that is very important. So having that information about the instance size is very important because you need to know this to create the virtual machines in PowerShell. And we will do that in our next session when we do everything that we can do to create virtual machines in PowerShell. We'll be extensively using this. So those are all the sizes. The other thing I wanted to show you at this point is going to this site, and you probably want to note down this URL, that virtual machine and cloud service sizes for Azure. So it has a lot more information with a lot more tabular form here where you can see all the virtual machine sizes and what their capabilities are. So you can see that all the OS disks are always 127, the temporary disk, the volatile disk that we had talked about, the disk over here. Remember that? Those also increase in sizes as the role size increases. So if you do a basic tier A4, you'd get up to 240 gigs of that. And then you get into the standard tier where you are going to spend most of your time in production because you'll probably want things like that. You can see that they all have 127 gigs. These are all the information of the sizes you have. It actually goes into more details on certain things. So here on the standard, you remember if I said extra small actually was something small, like the standard extra small, small, medium, large. You can call them by name when you are using the standard tier, so you can actually see the details of that. So these are things that you should bookmark, and these are the things you should actually view more often to ensure that you always have the latest data. I preferably go here and check my things, but sometimes if you need more information, you can always come over here. It gives you a little bit of an idea about the D series, G series VM. Obviously, you can see it's the biggest and the best performance, and we saw why it was the biggest and the best with the kind of resources that it was providing, right? I mean, it was huge. We have like 32 cores and 400 gigs of RAM. Wow, this could almost be like one of those big Hyper-V servers, right? Anyways, so that's what the sizes are, and that's what I wanted to talk about with the VM tiers and sizes. Do not forget that everything has a price. So all these different sizes are going to be priced differently. I will go to a website and show you how to calculate these prices. Microsoft gives a very nice fancy tool to actually do that. So if you have a project where somebody says that, hey, we need these two web servers, a domain controller, and a DNS server in the cloud, how much is it going to cost us? You should be able to first find out that which tier you want to go to. Chances are it's going to be standard tier. Which size do you want? You want A1, A0, you want a medium, a large, depending on your workload. Certain things have certain requirements. Like for example, SharePoint wants you to have a 12 gigs of RAM, minimum recommended. So I'll pick obviously one of those which actually have a 4-core at least minimum with 12 gigs. So I'll pick one of those role sizes and I'll do that, right? So it depends on your workload. And then you're going to build your pricing based on all such information on the tiers and sizes. Now, let's talk about images. Images are something we have used consistently, and I have always gone here and pretty much just came to virtual machines, new, went to from gallery, and always picked on the Windows Server 2012 R2 data center. But look at this, it's choose an image. So these are all the images that are there for you. So when you do a Windows Server, these are all the Windows Server. And by the way, right now, you can only find Windows Server 2008 and 2012 images in here. You won't find 2003. I don't even know why you'll require 2003, but you can't find it here. The other thing you will also notice is that in these images over here for Microsoft, you do not have any client image. So you cannot find an image for Windows 7 or Windows 8 or anything like that, 8.1. The reason behind that is that when you sign up for a trial, you will not find those images on here because Microsoft says that, hey, these are only for servers. However, if you are actually using an MSDN subscription will allow you $120 or $110 of credit of Azure every month. You will actually see images for a client operating system like Windows 8. And the reason behind that is they think that since you are developing applications, being an MSDN subscriber, they by default think that you might have to develop code which are going to be run on those client operating systems, and you need images for that. But obviously here, most of us who are not using an MSDN subscription will not see the client images, which is okay. And then you will see some more specialized images, like you can see a SharePoint image. So if I went and pretty much chose the SharePoint image here, it will give me the operating system, and it will also have SharePoint installed and configured for me on here just for some rapid work. How much of that should you really be using? Coming from a SharePoint consulting background, I'll tell you one thing. I really do not go and use this at all. We prefer to go and create like we'll go and choose one of these images over here for data center and we'll go install our own. We don't even use the SQL Server. But you know what? For you, this might actually work out. So if you go to SQL and choose one of these images just for your lab work, you do not know how to install SQL or you do not care, you can pretty much go and pick one of these images because most of the work is done for you with a standard configuration. So feel free to choose these images and go. And these are specialized images just to make sure that when I click on this, it's not going to just have in SQL. It's going to install, it's already installed with the operating system, Windows Server 2012 R2, and on Windows Server 2012 R2, it's going to install the SQL Server 2014. And this is much more specialized, as you can see. I've used this image, for example, before when I really wanted this in a hurry. And of course, you have Linux images over here, Ubuntu server. We have Core OS. This is, again, CentOS. I have used some of this. It's an open logic. It's a derivative of CentOS, which is, again, a derivative of Red Hat. So you can see all those images are created for you. You have Oracle as well. And then you have my images and my disks. So most of the images are already there. So chances are you'll use one of these, and I always have used one of these in my previous sessions, and which will suffice. Now, once in a while, you will be like, okay, I just don't want a complete bare metal operating system. I am going to install a bunch of software on it, and every time I go, I want to actually deploy from one of those images. So yes, you can actually configure a virtual machine with a standard image here. You can install all the necessary software and everything you want on them, and then you can take that and you can create your own image, which in Azure is like capturing. You can capture your own image and use it as a template to clone a bunch of other virtual machines. So in like in Hyper-V or VMM, you could pretty much right click and clone. Here you cannot do that. You have to first actually capture it and make sure that you actually have that image you really want, and it will show up under this My Images when you do that, and you'll be able to deploy. So technically, rather than coming over here and choosing the Microsoft over here, I could have come and picked up my pre-configured image over here and clicked next and gone. And it's a requirement for the exam, and we're going to go through one entire step of doing that through My Image. So this is what it meant by all the images over here. Going back to the slide over here, once again, we can go to the UI and do that. And if you come over here, we can do get Azure image. Oops, if we can type properly. Huh, get Azure VM image. My bad. Kept hitting tab and didn't get it. Get Azure VM image. You can see all the images that we have already seen there, and you'll see that this list actually keeps going on. The reason behind that is that there are a lot of images that are available to you from PowerShell that are not going to be something you deploy from your UI. So for example, you do not see a lot of specialized images under here, but you can see them in this list over here. These are not only operating system images. I'll show you that there are obviously other images that are not operating system based or does not have a base operating systems like this, right? So let's come over here. Let's select something more specific. So I'm going to have, let's see. I'm going to get Azure image and select image family. So if we go to the image family here, you can see a lot of things will just show up, right? Let's see. Our image family was, wow. I wanted to show you the Windows Server first. Um, Actually, let's do something. It's actually showing all the images, even if it's the same image family. Let me actually make this unique. So unique. And put the unique switch over here, so it will give me the unique image families. So it will obviously reduce quite a bit. So you can see that we have been using this image family, Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center. So this is the one we have been using. So Windows Server, the image family is 2012 R2 over here. So that's the image family. So you can see that there's a lot more image families over here than the ones you were seeing over here. I want to show you something specific that we did not see there. Um, Puppet, these are all over there. Dream Factory, Exoplatform, I'm pretty sure you won't see them over here. Variety Scale Linux. Um, you can see Barracuda Firewall. There's a firewall image here. And let's go to all. We can see Windows, Oracle, J87, the NG firewall. See, these are the firewalls that we were seeing here. So not all of them are operating systems. These are actually appliances, right? Web application. These are virtual appliances that you can see here. But you can see stuff that you don't see there. So that's what I mean. The way to clearly look at this is pretty much have this commandlet. So make a note of that. The other things we can see from get Azure VM image. It's always stuff that you discover from doing this. You can also see from here is that where are these images available. So you can come, for example, let's go up here. I can see OS is Windows, image family. So this is available. It actually gives you a nice description what this image is. It actually tells you who the publisher is, if it's premium. It also gives you the location of all these images. So just like sizes, not all images are available in every single location or every single data center. So this is a good place to come and view. And every time I come over here, I see a lot of things get changed and a lot of things gets added as Microsoft is adding more resources to the data center. So you can actually see a lot more comes here as well. So these are the bunch of commands which can be used for discovering all the images you have. But for primary work, for deploying things, you can come on the UI and do this. However, there's one thing about these images that's very important. When we create a virtual machine with PowerShell, you have to choose the right image, and it's not always easy to do that. So I'll give you an example real quick here. If I went to the virtual machine here and I picked this image, I'll just click that and go next, and I know that that's the image I want, right? And you can see there's version release date that we have always ignored. There are actually 3 versions of Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center, which was like patched on November, and then this is December, and then there was and December 11th, and then this was February 11th. So we always took the latest image. But if we went and we saw this in PowerShell, we'd see that it will give us these 3 options. Which one do you choose? Now, you might ask that why do we need these 2 old images? A lot of people are not comfortable with new images, with new patches. And there might be a patch that's applied in 2015 that was not there in the December edition. So you might only choose this one to be on a safe side. For all our purposes, we have always used the latest patched one. And you know what? Doing that in PowerShell is not very simple. So this is something we will be using in PowerShell. So the image family is Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center. And what we are going to do is that let's actually run this bit and I'll show you what it means. If you just run this, you are basically choosing the image that you want for your virtual machine. So if I did these 3 lines here and I did run selection, wait a little bit here, you can see that it's getting me all the images that belong to Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center. And if we know correctly from the UI, we have seen that there were 3 images based on the published date. And this is no different. There are going to be 3 published dates here, and this is giving me all the details of those. And if you look here, you'll see that there are 3 published dates. Okay? And these dates will be similar to the published dates we have seen before. So technically, we don't want that. We always want the latest one. And what I've done with this commandlet over here is I'm filtering the image and I'm sorting it by published date and I'm picking up the first one. We'll go into details on this when we go through our series of creating the virtual machines with PowerShell. But for now, you can actually see, and I have not put that image name here to just show what that did. So that went and pretty much took just the VHD. See, this is the image name. This VHD file or this image is same thing as the one we are seeing over here. It's Windows Server 2012 Data Center, and this is the version release date. That's the image. So from UI, it's so easy, but if we want to do this from PowerShell, we have to do all of this to ensure that we have the right image. So that's why you have to be comfortable with the get Azure VM image commandlet. Pause the video, play with the switches and find out more about how you can target these images. And like I mentioned in my slide before, these images are nothing but a VHD file that's already pre-created for you. The next one is custom images. Oops. The custom images are stuff that you will create by yourself for whatever reason. So you can create a VHD, not a VHDX file. You can create a VHD on-premise and you can upload it to Azure, or you can actually have one of those images like the ones we use and do customization on there, like add software and everything, and capture that and make it as template for your next ones. So that's all goes for images. Some advanced features. I'm not going to get into a lot of this, but I just want to give you an overview of what this actually are. These are the advanced feature of virtual machines that you'll find with your standard images, that it can be load balanced, there can be availability sets and scalability. I'm going to get into much details of these ones in upcoming sessions. So what a load balanced set does is that you can have one load balanced set and you can have multiple virtual machines as part of that load balanced sets. And what it will do is rather than going to one virtual machine every time somebody hits the URL, for example, it's a load balance set for a web farm, rather than going to one web server, if you had 5 web servers, the load balance set will ensure that it randomly touches all those 5 servers and balances the load for you. Then there are availability sets. Availability sets are something that's very interesting in Azure, and it's a cloud concern. The reason I talk about cloud concern is because you have a virtual machine, which end of the day is on the cloud, all fine, but in the cloud, it's actually somewhere in the world sitting on a data center on a physical machine. So if you are on US West or West US location, there might be a box or a server in the data center where your virtual machine is residing. So Microsoft does all the physical hardware management for you. This includes hardware upgrades. This includes the farmer on the server. It includes the virtualization software on the server. And for certain things, you might know this obviously, is that for maintenances, you might have to reboot the server. So what happens if you have one virtual machine sitting on one of those physical servers that Microsoft is going to run maintenance or updates on? It will restart and your virtual machine will get a restart as well. So to prevent that, Microsoft has something called as availability set. So if you have 2 virtual machines in availability set, what it will do is that it will ensure that physically they are not going to be part of the same physical infrastructure. So for example, they are going to be on 2 separate racks. If you have an availability set, put 2 virtual machines in there. Microsoft guarantees that they're on 2 physical racks. So if they're working on one physical box in one rack, the other is always going to be up. It's also going to have something called as an update domain. So that means if rack 1, all those physical servers are going through an update, your rack 2 are not going to have those updates done at the same time. So you're not going to lose or you're not going to have any downtime for your services. And then there's something called as scalability. Scalability is basically an automatic operations that handled by Azure for you. It's based on some provided configuration. So if you have 20 web servers, you have this really big web farm website. It's really busy. And you know on a regular day, the amount of users that come in, you don't need more than 4 or 5 servers. But then there is this one weird time when there will be a million users who are coming in and you need all the 20 servers up. So in cloud, it's all about elasticity. It's all about usage and usage-based billing. You do not want to be paying for all 20 web servers when on a regular day, all you do is use 4 servers. With the scalability, what will happen is you are going to put some pre-configuration or configuration in the scalability set, and you're going to say that, hey, if 100 users, for example, come in on a regular time, have this 4 web servers up and running. For some reason, if it crosses 100 and goes to like 10,000, make sure that you have the other 16 servers up and running when those people come in. So Azure will auto sense that for you and say that, hey, it's been an hour where we are seeing that there are consistently more than 100 users are coming in, and looks like the admin has put an instruction in there which says that if this happens, go fire up the other 16 web servers so our users are not affected due to high traffic volume. Um, so this is something that's an advanced feature that we'll go through for VMs. And this is what makes cloud, right? You can on demand expand or shrink resources the way you want it on demand. The only thing you have to remember about scalability is that there is an hour time that is set for you. So something called as thrashing. So you don't want 101 user to show up and all of a sudden all the 16 VMs fire up, and all of a sudden in the next minute it's going to be 98 users, which is below 100, and all those machines. So you don't want those machines to come up and go down like so fast, like thrashing the system. So what happens is that Azure takes up to an hour to actually calculate all of this and make sure those machines are up and they are serving it. So it's not going to be exactly to the point on the second or the minute it crosses a threshold. It takes some time. So these are the advanced features that we'll be going separately each session on each of this to get into more details, but these are advanced features on VMs that you can find up on Azure. Uh, Networking. This is the favorite slide. Watch the previous sessions. We went extensively on networking as much as possible. So if you want to know about virtual machine networking, view our previous slides. I have gone through a lot of stuff in there in details, and I have actually used PowerShell to create virtual machines there because certain networking configuration can only be done from PowerShell. So after we do a couple of more slides here, if you go back, it will actually start making a lot more sense. But I have tried my best to give you the most focus and exposure to all the networking. So please go ahead and view those networking videos if you haven't already to see how the whole networking things fit in with virtual machines. This is my favorite slide. Accessing the Azure VM. I'm not going to go into too much details on these ones. We have been accessing VMs quite a bit from our portal. So if you go over here to the virtual machine, let's cross this, and you go to one of these virtual machines over here, what we have done is gone on connect. So if we click on connect, you can see it downloads an RDP file. And if you click on this, open on this RDP file, it's going to ask you for your authentication, and it goes in and pretty much logs you to your virtual machine. And we have gone through all this information in our networking, that how it went to cRanger VM001, because that's the cloud service. It's using a specific port and it's doing all of that. So I'm not going to get into too much details on how to access that, but I do want to show you something over here, is that you can use a PowerShell commandlet to actually do exactly the thing we did over there, right? So you can use the get Azure remote desktop file, service name, put the service name here, the name of the virtual machine, and do a dash launch. What that will do, and actually, you know what? Let's go through one of this. So if I come over here, this is my commandlet, get Azure remote. This is exactly the same as clicking this connect button over here and downloading that RDP file. But for some reason, you might want to do this with a script. So this will be a service name, and the service name for this was cRanger VM001. So we'll do cRanger VM001, and then you have to put the name of the virtual machine, which is name, and this is the same in my case, 001, cRanger VM001, and you want to do a dash launch. So what this will do is it will try to go download that RDP file, as you can see, and it will actually launch that RDP file for you, and it will, oops, it went at, well, my temp folder is messed up over here. That's why it couldn't do it. But what it'll do is that it will try to fire the similar way this RDP file when we got over here, and it will bring you to this location. I'm not too sure why you would use that. You might have a script where you are creating a lot of, like, hundreds of virtual machines, and you want to ensure that all the RDP files are downloaded for you. So chances are you're not going to do a launch. So the switch for that would be, rather than a launch, it would be a local path, and you'd put it something like, I don't know, temp maybe. So you do something like that, and what it will do is that it will download this RDP file and put it over here. My thing over here is going to fail, unfortunately, because I probably do not have access to there. Yeah, the access is denied to ctemp from this shell. But however, you need a folder where you have access to download this RDP file. But usually this is the easiest way to do this, and that's how I do it all the time. But you might have obviously a specific reason to do it otherwise, right? So you can do that. Now, the next one is more important, is how do you access without an RDP? It means you're going to access this through PowerShell. And this is an interesting one. And a lot of people online, MSDN, have different ways of doing this, but I'll show you how to do this in a very simple way. So when we come to one of these virtual machines, I've shown you something before under endpoints, that there is a PowerShell endpoint at your public port 5986. These endpoints are always created for us when we create a virtual machine. So you may have seen that when we create this virtual machine, these two were there. But if we want to add more endpoints like HTTP or HTTPS, we can do so. But we have always had this PowerShell, and I know that the RDP file was with 50572 port taken to the RDP port 3389. But what was this PowerShell for? We never really used it. And I'm going to show you what this actually does. There's one thing that needs to happen over here. I want to fire up my Chrome browser. Unfortunately, I cannot do this with Internet Explorer. A lot of people have a lot of scripts to do this in a more unique and efficient way, but I found out that this was the easiest for me to demonstrate or to get started with because it's something you'll have to do. Every time you create a PowerShell endpoint, what it does is this PowerShell endpoint is actually over SSL. So there is a self-generated certificate that's created for you by Azure, which actually does this in the port 5986. What we want to do is connect to 5986 with our from the web browser and download that certificate, the self-signed certificate. People have a script to download this from PowerShell, but I found out that with Chrome, it was the easiest for me to look at that. So let's fire up Chrome. It's taking a while to do this. Okay, took a while for this Chrome to show up, but okay. Okay, now that Chrome is showing up over here, let's go to cranger VM002. I want to go, actually, let's go all the way back here to virtual machines. I want to take this one, the DNS name, obviously, and I'm pretty sure you understand why I'm taking this DNS name because I'm trying to access this VM. I'm going to access this with HTTPS. I'm going to put this DNS name here. So cranger VM002. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, let's go to the endpoint here. What was the endpoint here? 5986. Okay, so we are going to come over here and do 5986. Okay, so I put the cloud service name and I put the port number for the PowerShell. Let's do this. So your connection is not private and this is not it's a self-signed. That's why Azure does that. So I'm going to click on this lock button over here. I'm going to get the certificate information and I know this is the self-signed certificate. I can see it's a self-signed certificate that was created. Okay, I'm going to take this certificate and I'm going to save it locally on my computer. Nothing fancy here, just give a name. I'm going to put this on desktop and I'm going to call this cranger VM002. Okay, it's a regular certificate file. Finish. Export was successful. Okay, okay. For some reason on Internet Explorer, I could not get to a point where I could access this certificate. So that's why I used Chrome to do this. And what we are going to do right now is that we are going to take this cranger VM002 certificate and we are going to right click on this and go install certificate. We are actually trying to install this certificate on the local machine and we are going to place this in the Trusted Root Certification Authority. Okay, this is where we want to install this. You have to absolutely make sure this is where it's installed. Finish. It will say the import was successful. So import was done. That's it. That's all we need to do. The import was done. Now, we're going to go to our Windows Azure PowerShell. So let's actually expand this a little bit. So we know that we are connected to our subscription and we have imported the certificate. The VM we are working with is cranger VM002. Let's not forget that. Actually, we are also RDP 2002. You know what? I'm going to do something nice over here. I'm going to come over here and create a file. So this is how you would connect with RDP to cranger VM002, right? I'm going to create a text file over here saying, hello. How are you? Let's do that. Let's set that and do that. Okay. So we know cranger VM002 actually has that. So let's go to our Windows PowerShell. And this is the commandlet you're going to use. Enter -ps session. You want to put the computer name. cranger VM002 .cloudapp.net. All right. And the port number has always been 5986. So I'm going to just put that. If you have a different port number, you have to put that's fine. Credential. So you remember when I usually create the credential, my username is always Sean. So I'll just put Sean and I'll put use SSL. That's it. When you click enter, you can see that it's actually asking for your credential. So I'll put the password for the virtual machine that I always have. Press enter. It takes a couple of seconds. And as you can see, this actually, the command prompt changes. So we are now on cranger VM002 cloudapp.net PowerShell. This is actually no longer our local PowerShell. This is actually the PowerShell on the virtual machine itself. This is where it is right now. Actually, it's in the users shown documents. So let's go to the C drive. And if anything, let's do a dir. You can see that hello.txt over here. The reason behind that is that um, uh, what happened is that we are now in the shell and we are on the C drive remotely. So we can see hello.txt over there. Okay, so let's actually do this, dir. I'm going to do something nice. So to get content, hello.txt. Oops, hello.txt. So what this will do is get the content of the file, and if anything, you can see how are you. So at this point, we are on the machine, and we can remotely, so you can put, for example, get service. This get service is actually giving you all the services remotely on Cloud Ranger VM002. So not only you can do this from RDP, you can also use PowerShell console to remote into the server and do a lot of stuff. Now, I'm pretty sure a few of you guys are like going all crazy with this idea right now because this is amazing when it comes to scripting. You can actually have that script that runs locally on your computer. It can remote to your Azure VM and actually go do stuff and come back and give you results. And the way you exit from there is exit. When you do this exit, you're now back to your local stuff over here. Obviously, dir over here will show something different. So these are the two ways you can actually, oops, where did that go? These are the two ways you can RDP or PowerShell access to your virtual machines. And when I was researching this, there's a lot of ways to do this, and I found out that was the easiest way to do that for me anyways. Now, lifecycle of a VM. I know that this session is going a little bit more. This is probably one of the. This session is probably one of the most time-consuming session we have so far right now. It's gone obviously more than an hour, and I try not to do this because I obviously lose concentration after an hour. But feel free to pause and digest this information you have to do. The reason I try to cramp this all in together in this one session is to give you an introduction of all the advanced features and then build the other sessions on those as well. So lifecycle of a VM. So bear with me a little bit over here. So lifecycle of a VM. So we have talked a little bit about this before. When you stop a virtual machine, you can stop and deallocate where the virtual machine has no resources taken at all or reserved. And you can stop a virtual machine and do not deallocate, means you'll stop the virtual machine, but it will still hold on to the resources like the IP addresses and all that things. And then you can stop a virtual machine deallocate. And if you're using a PowerShell, you want to make sure that it does not prompt you for anything, just to streamline things. So I'm not going to go through the entire PowerShell commandlets here. So feel free to use this with one of your virtual machines that you have created. The thing that I have to show you over here is the basic stop Azure VM commandlet with the service name and the virtual machine. This is the most simplest one. It will actually stop the virtual machine completely and deallocate. This is similar to coming over here, going to cranger VM001, for example, and creating and hitting on this shutdown button. It actually tells you that do you want to get rid of all these resources. I mean, it will stop holding on to these resources. And if you remember our networking session, all the IP addresses that are dynamic are going to be released at this point. So if I click on yes, it will actually go stop and deallocate that. So this is this commandlet, stop Azure VM service name and over here. Okay. And then you have the stop Azure VM, the same thing with stay provisioned. With the stay provisioned, what it will do is that this is similar to going in the virtual machine and turning it off from there, right? So what you do is come to, let's go our client box here. So for example, cranger VM002. I'm not going to shut this down from here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and go shut down. Okay. Obviously, this is going to disappear and it's currently shutting down. So while that happens, I want to show in 001, you can see the status is a stop deallocated, which is this first one, stop deallocated. Means right now it's not holding on to any resources. And when you are on a stop deallocated, just because you're not holding on to any resources, you are not being charged for anything. There's no resource utilization. okay? And the regular stop, which was the second commandlet over here, stay provisioned, which is going on right now, and it's not updating this, but let me, it's probably going ahead and stopping the virtual machine from Azure itself. Let this load. Okay, took a while. About 30 seconds it took after I refreshed the browser. Sometimes with this portal, I've seen that you have to refresh the browser to see the latest state. So look at this. There's a difference between these two. This one is a stopped. We stopped this from the portal. That's why it says stop deallocated. This one is only stopped, not deallocated. You remember this one? We actually went and turned off from the virtual machine itself. In on premises at this point, your virtual machine would be completely turned off, which is true. But in Azure, it's stopped, but it's holding on to the resources like dynamic IP addresses like DIP, your public IP address like VIP. It's holding onto all that information. There's a vast difference between these two. The first one with the deallocated currently is not being charged for. However, for your cRanger VM002, this is actually still stopped but holding to resources, so it's being charged for right now. So if you leave that like that, and after a couple of days, you'll actually see that your usage, you'll see that your bill will show that you have been charged for some resources because you're holding on to that. So ideally for a production environment, if you're using everything static, this will probably not matter if you make it deallocated. But if you have not used anything static and you're all dynamic and you need to have access to those IP addresses, you should probably be just in a stopped state and pay for it rather than a stop deallocated. So those are the two things I wanted to show you there. The other thing I want to show you here is the force. So what happens is that when you are trying to stop this from PowerShell, if the last VM, if you're deleting a VM, which is the last VM in the cloud service, it will actually prompt you to ask you that, hey, are you sure you want to delete the cloud service? Because you are deleting the last VM of the cloud service means the cloud service is not going to do anything by itself. Do you want to delete that? Sometimes in your script, you don't want this prompts, so you do the dash force. So these are pretty self-explanatory. We have gone through this quite a few times in our previous sessions where we talked about networking, and those are the two ways, the allocated and the deallocated ways you can do this. Now, deleting all the Azure virtual machines. This is something we have not looked at. I'm pretty sure, and I've discussed this before, is that at the end of the day, when I'm done with everything, I want to make sure that I do not have any resources on Azure because I do not want to pay for it. So all these 3 virtual machines you're seeing created right now, I'm pretty sure next time I usually start the session, I always show under all items, there's nothing in there, just to ensure that I'm not being charged for it overnight or when I'm not using the subscription. So if I come over here and click to all items, this should be empty except the default directory, right? So let's think about something here. How do you delete this stuff? So one way would be just to come over here and click on delete. When you click on delete, it asks you 2 options. Do you want to delete the attached disks or like delete everything, or you want to keep the attached disks? Depending on what you're trying to do, you could leave the attached disks, so that way you can come later on and build another virtual machine based on that disk, right? And we'll go through details on that later as well. Or what I do, usually I come over here and say delete the attached disks as well. I don't want anything in here. I want this virtual machine completely gone. So it will be stopped and deleted completely. When I go to the storage, I should not be able to see that. So with the slides, that's what I'm doing over here. That remove a VM only and leave the drives. So this would be similar to coming over here, clicking on deleting and keep the attached disks. That's what it is. And the other one over here where I'm saying delete VHD, which means that it's exactly what I'm doing right now. I came over here and said delete the attached disks, right? So these are the only 2 options that you'll be using it. I particularly do not use delete VHDs and all that from this script. I have a totally separate script, which is a lot of fail-proof and it's a foolproof as well, that I want to make sure when I'm deleting something, it deletes everything from that subscription. And I'm a little hesitant to make that script public. And the reason behind that is that I have this weird feeling that one of you guys are going to use that in your production environment. And what it will do is go through and easily remove every single thing that you have in your production environment. But I do have a script which I run at the end of the day, which goes through everything. It stops all my virtual machines, deletes my virtual machines, deletes the VHD, it deletes the cloud services, the storage accounts I have shown, it deletes the networks if we have a VNets and everything if we have created. Um, Once I have completed my entire session and this entire program we are having right now, in my last session, I will probably make that public because by then I will feel confident that we all have all the knowledge and the wisdom behind not running a script like that and deleting everything from the subscription. And to be frank, I have done that partially once where I ran the script and my account, production account, had multiple production subscriptions. One of the subscriptions was a test subscription, and somehow I forgot to actually go to the test subscription and hook up to that subscription. So when I went and ran that script, it went to the account directly, pretty much chose the first subscription it could find, and it was just going through stopping the virtual machines. At that point I realized through the name that, hey, that virtual machine is a production virtual machine, why is it stopping that? And I was thinking there are almost 12 to 13 virtual machines that were in production, and I was just thinking that right after stopping those 13 production virtual machines, it would have gone actually and started deleting the VHDs. And I'm taking the time to let you know that is because when you do scripts, those happens quite often, and especially if you have accounts with multiple subscriptions. If you run a script, you want to absolutely be sure that you are running scripts in the right subscription. And you know what, let me just go through that once again with you. You can always do a get Azure subscription to see which subscription you're on. So I'm on my Ranger pay-as-you-go subscription right now. My trial ran out, so but you might have a trial here or something. So anything you do, especially while running this, I mean, even if you get these names right, like I know all my test VMs starts with C Ranger, so I probably do not have an issue. But if you're going to have a script which is going to go and do all of this automatically or whatever, you want to make sure that you are hooked up to the right subscription. So I will share that script at one point, just not today. But this is how you should be going and deleting your virtual machines from PowerShell. For now, it will suffice to come over here. You can see there are cloud services, there are storage accounts. Make sure after you delete everything, you're hitting a refresh to actually see what's actually been there and what's not deleted. The other thing I want to show you, yes, so you can absolutely be sure that you're doing this before you do any delete commandlets, okay? All right, so this turned out to be one of the longest sessions we have ever had. It's at 1:30 right now, hour 30 minutes. I don't want to take too much of a time, but what we did in this session is I've given you a complete overview of the different things that can happen to an Azure virtual machine. There's a lot more that will happen with these virtual machines. We'll see in the next few sessions when we get into more details. Like we have created virtual machines in the user interface with management portal. I'm going to dedicate my next session or one of the next sessions completely on how to do this entire thing in PowerShell. So you should be able to write scripts where you can generate these virtual machines in a really short amount of time with the least amount of intervention, user intervention. So if you have an entire lab to do, you could pretty much have this nice script written where it will go fire up everything for you. And that's going to be very interesting. Then we are going to go through the storage, all the separate constructs we have talked about, right? We'll go through the storage point of view, how to store it. We're going to go more into the images. We're going to go actually creating an image ourselves and uploading one. And we will also go through capturing an image that you made through Azure, and you did all of that. And one of the most complicated topics after that we will talk about is actually load balancing, availability set, and scalability, which takes a little bit of ingenuity. For me, at least, it was a little bit, you just have to do things in a little bit clever way. And after that, there are a lot of other things that we need to talk about, which are virtual machine specific configurations and extensions and things like that. Anywho, this took a long time to finish this session, but I hope you have a basic idea of where the virtual machines are going and what we'll be having in the next few sessions. Feel free, as usual, to drop in some comments in YouTube and as well as the blog site. Um, Feel free to pause and get the commandlets over here. Someone actually emailed me recently asking that if I'm going to ever post these slides. I do have a plan to post these sites at some point. It's just that I have not gotten into it. If you go to the Cloud Ranger blog, I'm not sure if all of you have gone to the Cloud Ranger blog or not, but let's actually go through that. cloudrangerblog.net. Oh, cloudrangerblog. I'm going to Cloud Ranger blog. It's cloudranger.net. A bit. Okay, so this is the blog, and if you go to every time I post a video on YouTube, it's already over here as well, but there are more information on this blog, obviously. If you go under the free Azure training, you can actually see all the Azure videos we have had so far in here. So this is a good location to come and bookmark this stuff so you can go directly. It takes you to the post, and so for example, today will be the 14th video. When I add that, it will be right over here. It also shows you the times and each thing. So what I'm going to do in the future is going to actually have the PDF of the slides next to this. I still have to convert them to PDFs and put the slides over there. So it might be something easy for you to look at. But my goal over here has never been the theoretical concepts. I just want to make sure that you're getting the maximum hands-on. That's why I go through all these demonstrations, and I hope that that helps you more. So feel free to actually pause the videos and go and do this while I'm doing that. Like I say in my all sessions, that you should be getting more of a um, uh, practical exposure by going through all these videos than most of the other trainings. What I have felt personally, and this is one of the reasons I have started making these videos, was that most trainings online or even class-led trainings were either too rushed, where I felt that there was a big piece of paper that was given to me and told that, okay, go through this, and if somewhere you got stuck, it was a little hard to catch up because those classes are probably 2 or 3 day sessions. And these were great instructors. It's just that it was very concise and it was very much to the point where we did not get enough time to do a lot of things. And the other thing I wanted to do also at that same time is like provide the maximum amount of demonstrations. Not all books go through all the demonstrations, though I zoom through, but what I do is I try to put that for you so you can actually do that, and at the same time give you the most easiest way I have found to do something, and that can be helpful so you don't have to go Bing or Google and try to find this information for yourself. All right, thank you for viewing, and I'll be seeing you in the future sessions.